The year is 1945. A stench of smoke and defeat hangs over the crumbling remnants of the Thousand-Year Reich. The world believes this catastrophe was the unavoidable consequence of overwhelming Allied power. But that is the lie. The truth is far more damning. The downfall of Nazi Germany was an act of historical suicide, engineered by a rogues gallery of men whose stupidity proved more devastating than any Allied bomb. We're not talking about academic intelligence. Most of these men were theoretically smart, yet their real-world actions were catastrophic. This is the definitive story of the dumbest Nazi leaders of the Third Reich, ranked purely by the scale of their blunders, the irreversible mistakes that destroyed armies, shattered diplomatic ties, and guaranteed the Reich's collapse. We are not just listing failures, we are counting down the 5 decisions that meet 2 critical criteria. First off, we will look at the scale of consequence. The blunder immediately and irrevocably destroyed armies or crippled a branch of the military. Then we will look at the guaranteed defeat. The decision once made set the strategic board in a way that overwhelming long-term defeat became mathematically certain. Okay, let's get into it. Imagine winning the war, only to throw away victory because of a childish fit of rage. That is exactly what Hermann Göring did in the Battle of Britain, and the mistake cost Germany its air superiority forever. His first huge failure came during the Battle of Britain. Göring had arrogantly promised Hitler an air victory in weeks, paving the way for the invasion. The Luftwaffe was actively destroying the RAF's critical radar installations and fighter airfields, bringing the British command structure to the brink of collapse. Then, after a minor British raid on Berlin, Göring threw an emotional tantrum. He made the fatal, impulsive blunder of ordering the Luftwaffe to stop attacking the airfields and start bombing London instead. This switch in strategy was based purely on vengeance, not military logic. By shifting from high-value military targets to terror-bombing civilian centers, Göring gave the battered RAF fighter command the precious 2 weeks of breathing room they desperately needed. They repaired their airfields, reorganized their command, and brought in fresh pilots, ultimately winning the battle for the skies. The strategic consequence is clear. This blunder ended any realistic hope of invading Britain and committed German air power to a costly war of attrition. Göring's mistake lost the invasion of Britain, but that failure was nothing compared to the diplomat whose fatal mistake gave Stalin the precious time he needed to prepare for total war. This next Nazi's mistake looks like a diplomatic victory, but it was the single worst blunder that guaranteed Stalin would be prepared to crush the invasion. Joachim von Ribbentrop's arrogance accidentally armed the Soviet Union. His most infamous achievement, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact of 1939, was a stroke of genius on the surface, temporarily avoiding the two-front war. Germany needed the pact to conduct the Polish campaign without Soviet interference, but Ribbentrop's arrogance led to a breathtakingly short-sighted oversight. The pact guaranteed Hitler a 2-year window of peace with the Soviet Union. Incredibly, this non-aggression pact gave Stalin critical years to fully rebuild and mechanize the Soviet military, including moving factories far out of reach of German bombers. Ribbentrop completely misread the world, thinking British appeasement was weakness, and ensured Germany won no friends, while guaranteeing its ultimate enemy sufficient time to become unstoppable. The strategic consequence is profound. Ribbentrop's miscalculation armed Germany's greatest enemy for the inevitable invasion, ensuring that when Operation Barbarossa finally launched, the Germans would face a modernized, industrialized foe. Ribbentrop's miscalculation armed Germany's greatest enemy for the inevitable invasion, leading to a massive blunder. Yet, even a rearmed Soviet Union might not have won if 2 generals hadn't made the fatal mistake of letting Hitler sacrifice an entire army. Cowardice killed the German 6th Army. 2 men, Hitler's most senior generals, chose silence over saving 300,000 lives at Stalingrad. When the German 6th Army was encircled in the frozen hell of the Soviet counteroffensive, the military reality was clear. They had to break out immediately or be destroyed. Germany's best field generals desperately pleaded with Hitler to approve the breakout order. This was the near-miss climax that could have saved 300,000 men. The specific failure was their refusal to challenge Hitler's Führerbefehl, leader's order, to hold fast. Instead of forcing the issue, Jodl and Keitel stood by in silence, supporting the delusion that the army could be supplied by Göring's failing Luftwaffe. By validating Hitler's insane directive, they ordered the army to stay put, effectively sentencing the Sixth Army to annihilation by starvation, freezing, and Soviet attack. Their blind obedience was a fatal combination of cowardice and catastrophic stupidity. The strategic consequence is clear. Keitel and Jodl's failure of nerve annihilated the Sixth Army, Germany's most powerful formation, marking the decisive and irreversible turning point on the Eastern Front. The loss of morale, manpower, and materiel was a wound the Wehrmacht never recovered from. Do you think the war was truly lost at Stalingrad? Let us know in the comments. Keitel and Jodl's failure of nerve annihilated the Sixth Army, marking the decisive turning point on the Eastern Front. But the destruction of one field army was overshadowed by the breathtaking incompetence of the man who personally destroyed the final defense of Berlin. Heinrich Himmler's command of the last defense of Berlin was so detached from reality, it guaranteed the capital's immediate collapse. In January 1945, with zero practical military experience, Hitler made Himmler commander of Army Group Vistula, the half-million-man force defending Berlin. The appointment itself was the mistake, but Himmler's command confirmed his rank. Unbelievably, the fanatic set up his headquarters on his personal train without the right maps or communication, and was utterly lost the moment the Soviets attacked. Himmler's total detachment from reality meant he issued orders for divisions that didn't exist and launched badly planned counteroffensives that failed immediately. He managed the command like an SS paperwork exercise, not a battle. His mismanagement led to immediate catastrophic casualties and did nothing to slow the Soviet advance. The strategic consequence is horrific. Himmler proved that his fanaticism was no substitute for military sense, thus destroying the final critical defense of the capital and accelerating the fall of Berlin. Himmler's mistake guaranteed the fall of Berlin, but all these catastrophic errors, from losing the air war to sacrificing armies, were nothing compared to the self-inflicted blunders made by the man at the top. Everyone knows Operation Barbarossa was a huge mistake, but it was not the decision that guaranteed Hitler's defeat. That happened 6 months later when he made the baffling, world-changing blunder of declaring war on the United States. Hitler's first world-changing blunder, Operation Barbarossa, shattered the foundation of German power by guaranteeing an attritional war. But the single most idiotic decision that guaranteed defeat came just 6 months later. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Hitler made the baffling decision to declare war on the United States. Hitler felt bound by the Tripartite Pact to aid Japan, but the treaty did not require a declaration of war against the US. By making this move, he relieved President Franklin D. Roosevelt of the political difficulty of focusing entirely on the Pacific, and formally brought the world's greatest industrial power into the European war against him. Incredibly, this blunder guaranteed Germany would face a two-front war against overwhelming material superiority, a power Hitler had explicitly stated Germany must never confront, making all subsequent failures absolutely inevitable. Was this moment, December 11, 1941, the true point of no return? The terrible mistakes of these men sealed their fate. But if the leadership was so incompetent, how did they win at the start? What if the world's most feared war machine, the Blitzkrieg, was a historical lie? Find out next.